Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, was-salatu was-salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim tasliman kathira. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum everyone. So, Jazakumullah khair, mashallah, is very nice recitation. When we look at these particular ayat, there is a lot to take from them. And normally when I talk about Asiya alayhi salam, the first thing that I start with is the importance of knowing the context of the ayat and the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, we read these every Ramadan, we read these ayat, and the reality is when you know the context and the reason why these ayat were revealed, then you appreciate the soul and the ruh of the Quran. Really, because the Quran of course has a fadl and a virtue of recitation alone. But when you understand the meaning and then you understand why it was revealed and the maqsad and the objective of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these ayat, it opens your mind, it opens the wisdom of the soul. And so Asiya alayhi salam was a very special and unique personality. Now she was one of the four who are the best women who will be in Jannah and the best women of the dunya. So does anyone know the four, inshallah? Does anyone want to take a guess who the four women are? And maybe put your hand up is better, as opposed to everyone shouting. Go on. Aisha radiallahu anha, she's not mentioned in the hadith, she's very high up, but she's not mentioned in the hadith. Khadija is one, who is the first wife of the Prophet ﷺ, Khadija bint Khuwaylid. Maryam alayhi salam, who was the daughter of Imran. Asiya, of course, and there's one more. The beloved daughter Fatima bint Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that there were four women who had reached a particular rank. And some scholars actually, interestingly, they said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam would actually in Jannah would be married, of course, to Khadija, but also to Asiya. This is, some scholars said this because of their high rank. Of course, he deserves only the best. Wallahu a'lam. But what I want to come back to is the concept of Asiya radiallahu anha. Now, before we go into the ayah, what is the meaning of the significance of this verse? The verse in particular is which one? The one which was recited, mashallah, by our dear Ustadh, mashallah. What's your name? Huh? Sakan? Zaklan, mashallah, mashallah. Allah give you barakah, inshallah. So, Allah, He mentions وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا امْرَأَةَ فِرْعَوْنَ قَالَتْ رَبِّ ابْنِ لِي عِنْدَكَ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ. That Allah Azza wa Jal gave a mathal, an example of the wife of Fir'aun. And what does she say? She said, "Oh Allah, grant me a house with you in Jannah." What does this mean? Why has she said it? What is the context? What is the significance? Before we go into it, we have to know the context. We know that at the time of Musa alayhi salam, just before he was born, it was said that Fir'aun, of course, was a tyrant. And it is said that he had a dream. While he was leading the kind of Egypt, and there were two types of groups. There were Bani Israel and there were the Copts, with his people, native people. He had a dream that in his dream that Bayt al-Maqdis, a fire came from Bayt al-Maqdis and it destroyed all the houses in Egypt, apart from the houses of the Bani Israel. And so he went to a fortune teller. He said to the fortune teller, "What does this mean?" And the fortune teller said that there is going to be a boy who is going to come from the houses of Bani Israel, and he is going to now take your kingdom. So what does he order? We know that he orders that for every single male boy which is born, he is to be slaughtered every alternate year. So every second year, every single boy is to be taken and slaughtered. You can't imagine, you know, the extent to which he was willing to go to as a tyrant to protect his kingdom. So Harun alayhi salam was born in one, but Musa was born in the time of when they were slaying the children. And we know the story that Musa alayhi salam's mother had basically delivered Musa alayhi salam, and they found out that Musa alayhi salam has been born, so they wanted to kill him. إِذَا أُوحَيْنَا إِلَى أُمِّ Musa, when Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَإِذَا أُوحَيْنَا إِلَيْكُمْ Musa, which in the Quran, which says we gave the revelation to the mother of Musa, that أَنِقْذِفِيهِ فِي التَّابُوتِ فَقْذِفِيهِ الْيَمِّ, that throw him into the box and throw him into the water. They said actually the word Musa is from Musa, which is water box in Hebrew. Actually, that's his asl of the name, Wallahu alam. So she hears that the people are coming to take Musa alayhi salam. She throws him into the water river. And of course, this is something for a woman to throw her son into the river is a major thing. So she throws it into the river. Ibn Kathir says that the river was very harsh, but as soon as the box entered, it started to be calm and it started to lead to a particular area. As it leads to the area, it goes to where it passes through the river Nile and it comes onto the bed of the shore of who? Of Fir'aun. And Asiya and Fir'aun are there and the guards come and they say, what is this? So they try to open the box, they can't. Asiya comes running down and she's wondering what's happening. She comes down and she manages to open the box and she sees Musa alayhi salam. They say that when she first saw Musa alayhi salam, she said that the love of Musa alayhi salam entered directly into her heart. She had this ta'alluq and this relationship with him immediately. And so when Fir'aun came, he thought to himself immediately that this could be one of the boys that is going to take my kingdom. First she says, لا تقتلوه عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وهم لا يشعرون. As in the Quran it mentions, she says, do not kill it. She said, قرة عين لي ولك, that it is perhaps a comfort for my eyes and for your eyes. And perhaps through this child there will be some goodness. And so Fir'aun reluctantly agreed at the time. And he said to her, he might be a qurra for you, qurratu ayn, like a coolness of the eyes for you, he is not for me. He was very skeptical. So we know the story. Then of course she manages, Asiya alayhi salam manages to find that the mother of Musa to suckle him, and she returned back to the mother of Musa for a certain amount of time from the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now he was now growing up in the family of Fir'aun. So he was in the palace, he was with the tyrant, the biggest kafir in our tradition. He said, Ana rabbukum al-a'la, I am your greatest, your highest Lord, Fir'aun used to say to the people. He thought he was something special. For when he was there, he got an inkling, some people, some scholars said that he actually, Musa alayhi salam accidentally hit Fir'aun while he was a child. And he got angry and he said to himself, you know what, I need to get rid of this child. And Asiya alayhi salam came again and she got in between. She said, no, don't do anything to him. She goes, we can test, he's not going to do anything to you. And some of the narrations indicate that they agreed to test Musa, to test his intelligence. They bought, some said it was gold and some said it was a date. And they bought a coal. And they brought it to Musa alayhi salam while he was a child. And they said, take one to eat it. And he was putting his hand towards the date. And Jibreel alayhi salam came and he maneuvered and made his hand go to the coal. And so he picked up the coal and he put it into his mouth to eat it, thinking it's a date. And it burnt his mouth. Two things. Fir'aun, through this, thought this child is not intelligent, so he's no threat to me in the future. This was the hikmah. But also when we hear about Musa having a lisp, where he says when he's with Harun later on in the Quran, they said this comes from this story, that he had a lisp. He was now in the house of Asiya radiallahu anha. Now in this time, all this time that Musa is here, she is a believer. But she is a believer of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despite being married to the biggest tyrant. And this is a very important point. That you can have a relationship with someone, thereby you may be a believer and the other person could be potentially a disbeliever, or even if we say they're not a disbeliever, they might be evil, right? Some examples of where you have a pious person married to one who is not pious. Anyone got any examples? One of them was in the ayah which mentioned, mashallah, by Zaklan.
See the question again?
So an example of someone pious, someone who is God-fearing, married to someone who is not. Or not married, or has a relationship, close relationship. Lut alayhi salam and his wife. That's one. Noah and his son. Anyone else? One more. Ibrahim and Azar and his father. Interestingly enough, these are three different relationships. One is what? So one is by marriage, one is by father, and the other one is by the son. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying here is that you can have a situation where you can be blood related, or you can have a matrimony of marriage, and you are with together for years and years and years, and one of you could be on the tariq and the way to Jannah, and the other one is going into the hellfire. Or it might be that you have two different, and this is an important point. You know, where they say, psychologists say, isn't it, that you're the product of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, right? The 5 people in your life that you spend the most time with, you are an amalgamation of that person. Why? Because you pick up their traits, you pick up how they deal with things, you pick up how their relationships are with others. And so when you are like that, you pick up from them automatically. But that doesn't mean that you are gonna be like them. So if you've got 4 or 5 friends that you spend so much time with, and they're, you know, smoking and they're doing evil things and they're doing dalal and misguidance, etc., it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go that way. You can do, because you're a product of your environment to an extent. But also both in Sharia, from the qisas and the stories that we know, but also from a psychological perspective, if you have firm certainty in what is right, you will not be swayed by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah yahdi man yasha wa yudillu man yasha. He guides whom He wills and He misguides whom He wills. If He wills, He could have made Abu Lahab from the believers, and He could have made Umar radiallahu anhu from not from the believers, but He chose Umar over Abu Lahab. And so what does this mean? Is 2 things. One is that to have that tawakkul and that faith and that shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you are a believer. The fact that you're sat here today, despite the fact that other people are doing other things, this is a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a ni'mah that we see the youth coming to the masjid. Because this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put وَأَلْقَى فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ, and is thrown into their hearts a love for ilm, a love for attending the masjid. But there are many children out there who could be even atheists. You hear these stories all the time, that there's children who don't have a love for the Prophet ﷺ, or there's children who do this, there's children who do that. You have the disbelievers. And so Allah guides whom He will. So we say Alhamdulillah, that, and we ask for istiqamah, and we ask for that we're firm and certain, because Allah can change things as He wishes. But we pray and we have that tawakkul and we have that sincerity and humility that Allah Azza wa Jal, you keep us on the straight path. But this point is still important, that don't feel that just because you have someone who is there, that you cannot change and you cannot be a good person. You know, Allah changes the heart. They say, yuqallibul qulub. You know, Allah Azza wa Jal, Ya muqallibul qulub, thabbit quluban ala dinik. You know, oh Allah, change our hearts and make our hearts firm on the religion. What is the qalb? What's the root of qalb? The root of the word qalb, which is your heart, from some qalaba. Qalaba is what? To turn. The hearts turn. It can go from belief or disbelief to belief. It can go to doing obedience to Allah to disobedience to Allah. This is the nature of the heart. Allah can make your heart in such a way that you are close to Him. Reminds me of a story. It's quite a funny story. A man called Abu Bakr al-Shibli, and he was a famous scholar, and he was in Sham in Syria, and he was traveling with a group, and while he was traveling, there were these bandits who came. Ibn Qudama mentions this in a book called At-Tawwabin, which is the repenters. And this gang leader came with his bandits, and they took all of the food and the belongings from everyone, including Sheikh Abu Bakr al-Shibli. They took their bags, they took their food, and what they did, they put it all in front of the gang leader. And part of it was almonds, some money, some salt, and this and that in front of the gang leader. And they're all, held up. So you see all of the bandits, they're eating all of this food. They're eating the almonds, they're eating whatever, and they're giving it to this leader. And the leader says, no, I can't have it. I can't eat. I'm fasting. Abu Bakr Shibli's like, and he's there with him. He says, what do you mean you're fasting? He says, how can you be fasting? You're taking and pillaging and stealing from the believers, and you're saying you're fasting. He says, Ya Sheikh, we have to keep some form of reconciliation between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He just thought, what is this? So it said, I think months or years later, Abu Bakr al-Shibli was doing tawaf around the Kaaba. He came to do Umrah. And he saw this same gang leader doing tawaf in his ihram. And he sees him he said his face was full of noor. And he said, what's happening here? He goes up to him, he says, are you the same person who was stealing recently? He says, yes. He says, how are you here? He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the concept of tawbah in my heart. And I told you before, there's always the fasting was my reconciliation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, someone who can be evil, someone who can have a bad past, Allah Azza wa Jalla can change their heart. You know, Malik bin Dinar, and you have so many people, Umar radiallahu anh, you know, they used to bury their children at that time. So everyone can have that. But what we say is that we have that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we have that humility with Him. So anyway, Asiya is a believer. Now Asiya has a big major test on her hands. Because at one point there's a famous story which is mentioned in the hadith. This is a hadith, by the way. Some of the scholars, some of them differed, but many of them said this is an authentic hadith. They said that this is the story of the hairdresser of the daughter of Fir'aun. And her story is this, is that the Fir'aun had some daughters, some of them from his other wives and some of them from, you know, other places. And the hairdresser, she was a believer, she was combing the hair of this individual, this girl. And as she's combing the hair, she drops the comb. And she says, Bismillah. And as she says, Bismillah, the girl says, don't you mean in the name of my father? Because they genuinely felt that the Fir'aun was God, that he was an ilah. And the woman said, no, not him, but your Lord, my Lord and your Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the girl, she said, what do you mean? She says, my Lord and your Lord is Allah. And she says, I'm going to tell my father. So she goes to her father and she says to her father that this is what this woman said. And so Fir'aun summons the woman. He says, come here. He says, what did you say? And she said that my Lord and your Lord is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fir'aun got extremely angry. And he was a tyrant, oppressor, major oppressor. He said, he summoned and he told his guards, he said, bring this woman and bring her children. And so they brought her and he said to her that I'm now going to throw your children into this pot. Na'udhu billah. And she was upset and she said, look, okay, minimum, just keep my bones close with them together in one cloth. He said, fine. And so one by one they threw the children and they put them into this pot. And she was so upset with each child going on. It's a very, very sad story. But then when the fifth child, the one that she was looking after was a baby, she's suckling him, feeding him. And she starts to waver. She says, I can't do this. She's about to say this to herself. I can't throw this baby into the pot. And so the baby speaks. And this is one of a few times where the baby has spoken. And he says, don't worry, my mother. He says, Inna adhab ad-dunya ahwan min adhab al-akhirah. That the adhab and the punishment of the dunya is much easier than the adhab in the akhirah, the punishment in the akhirah. And so she threw the child and then Fir'aun threw her into the pot. Now this was a major situation. Of course, a believer, cruelty, children, poverty, oppression. And so what happens? Asiya radiallahu anha has had enough. She says, I cannot accept this anymore. She knows that Fir'aun is the leader of the Egypt. Anything he says, whoever he desires to be killed will be killed. Whoever is going to be alive is going to be alive. Torturing, enslaving, doing such evil. But because of her iman, she could not accept it anymore. And so what does she do? She goes all the way to Fir'aun and she said, Ya Fir'aun, laqad kafartu bik. Oh Fir'aun, I disbelieve in you. And I believe in Allah, in the Lord of Harun wa Musa. She goes, and wala ubali, and I don't care. لَقَدْ كَفَرْتُ بِكْ وَلَا أُبَالِي وَآمَنْتُ بِرَبِّ هَارُونَ وَمُوسَى. That indeed I disbelieve in you, and I do not care, and I believe in the Lord of Harun wa Musa. Of course, this is a major statement to say to the biggest tyrant of the land. And so what happens? Fir'aun, he checks, he says to his people, أَلَا تَعْجَبُونَ مِنْ قَوْلِهَا. This woman, are you not surprised by the qawl of this woman? What should I do with her? She said that there is a Rabbi ghairi, there is a Rabban ghairi, that there is a Lord apart from me. And all his advisors and all his people, of course, they're scared of him. They said, uqtulha, kill her. And so he orders, he says, take her. And so they take her and they take her outside where it's blazing hot. And so they tie her hands, they tie her legs, they keep her in the heat, and they don't feed her, they don't give her any drink, they are beating her, they're hurting her, they're taking her dignity, and she's being tortured. Under the sun, it's extremely hot, and she is finding it difficult. And it is said that the angels, they're putting their wings out to shade Asiya radiallahu anha. And as they're shading her, they are still torturing her. But what happens to Asiya radiallahu anha? Asiya radiallahu anha, she says the famous statement which was mentioned. رَبِّ ابْنِ لِي عِنْدَكَ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ. Oh Allah, build for me a house with you in Jannah. Do you understand the context of the ayah? Why does Allah mention that Imra'atu Fir'aun, that the wife of the greatest tyrant, she says, oh Allah, grant for me and build for me a house with you in Jannah. That was her dua. And so it's mentioned that they were thinking, what is happening here? Because she started to smile. She started to laugh. And they were like, what is happening here? Fir'aun was getting agitated. They were getting agitated. She was laughing. Why? Because it's as if she could see that she was going to go to Jannah. So what does Fir'aun order? He orders that she is put at the foot of a mountain, and they say that we want to take her, so we want to really oppress her. And they put a boulder at the top, and they throw the boulder over to fall onto her. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His rahmah, He takes her soul before the boulder hits. And it hits, and she has passed away already. The thing is though, brothers and sisters, is that when you look at her yaqeen and her wantingness for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I want a house with you in Jannah, Ya Rabbi. That's what got her to the maqam that she is the fourth greatest. Of course, there's a separate concept that she fought against oppression. But her tawakkul and her concept of understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who deserves my obedience and that He is the most just. That she went through hardship in the dunya, but she is in the best in the akhirah. And so, when I think about this, that when you read the Quran, there are many things, brothers and sisters. When you know the context, you have an appreciation for these people. These are the stars. They are the nujum. They're our followers. It's not the Ronaldos and these TikTokers and YouTubers. These people who sacrifice, and they are loved by Allah, and they will be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the akhirah. And on this last point, I want to end that what was her particular characteristic? It was the characteristic that she was standing up to oppression. She would not accept, she could not accept with iman in her heart the oppression taking in front of her. She's willing to risk her life, not just risk her life, risk the fact that I'll be tortured. But she did it because she knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that everything will come back to. And it's a second point here is that, look, sometimes it's natural. It can happen that in the dunya there will be oppression, but you will not get recompense in this dunya. This is a story, this is a lesson. She didn't get recompense in this dunya. She passed away before she could. That can happen to any of us. We could be wronged by certain things and we say, oh Allah, we want you to take vengeance on this individual. But it might not happen in your life. Don't worry about it, don't sweat about it. Your reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Someone has said, for example, that they've not been given, someone has not paid them for their money, someone has said evil things about them, someone has hurt another, there's relationship problems, issues with inheritance. So much dhulm takes place in our lives. It happens all over the place. You can try to seek retribution what you can, but sometimes you can't. It's out of your hands. So you just say, Ya Allah, we leave it with you. But no, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make sure that everything is set وَيَحْكُمْ بِالْعَدْلِ, and He judges with adl and justice. To the point that in the hadith it's mentioned that a hornless goat which was attacked will take retribution by the horned goat. Every single thing, حَتَّى مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ, every atom's weight of injustice will be balanced Yawm al-Qiyamah. On that day, everything is balanced. If you were oppressed in one way, that someone said something negative about you to one person, and you didn't get it sorted out in the dunya, you will take that deed from them, the good deed. And if they don't have any good deeds to take from them, then you will offload your bad deed to them. That's how much wazn the qist will be. This is the qist and the justice Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give. But with that justice, you have the extra additional reward that if you endure with patience in the dunya and you maintain your connection with Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yudha'ifu liman yasha, He will improve and He will increase for whom He wills. You might do a small deed, you might say, I forgive you. I forgive you for, oppressing me. It's fine, I'm not going to sweat it, I'm going to let it go. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might, from 7 to 700 times, He might increase the reward for that one part of forgiveness that you've done. He might just give you 10 times more that you're worth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huwa al-akbar. He is the greatest. SubhanAllah is one of the shuyukh, Shaykh Kishk. He said, Ya Rabbi kayfa as'aluka wa ana. Oh Allah, how do I ask you and I am I, because I'm sinful. Ana astahi an as'alak wa ana. And I am so ashamed to ask you and I am I have these sins and I've done these wrong things. How can I ask you, Ya Allah? But then he says, وَلَكِنْ كَيْفَ لَا أَسْأَلُكَ وَأَنْتَ أَنْتَ. But how do I not ask you, Ya Allah, when you are you? When you are the Lord of the worlds, when everything is in your hands, when you control the universe. If you have that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what you do in the dunya, you might want £1, £2 as retribution. Allah will give you 1,000,000 in the akhirah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Kareem. He is generous. بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ يُنْفِقُ كَيْفَ يَشَاءُ. His hands are outspread, He will give to whom He wills. So if you have that connection with Allah, don't worry about what happens in the dunya. Just do your best to make sure that your connection with Allah is strong, that you have that thing that you want to be built with Allah Azza wa Jalla in the akhirah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you goodness in this dunya, and if not, you do total goodness, you will get the bliss in the akhirah, inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us of those people who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are of those who are under His rahmah and His guidance and His ni'mah, and that He allows us to be people of having prophetic qualities in what we do in this life, and that we are forgiven in this dunya and in the akhirah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.